Well, guys, in this video, we will talk about authentication. In the Business Central integration with the third-party application, we have two types of authentication. One is basic and one is authentication. Basic authentication is very simple authentication, which will support in the on-premises version. And from the in the next release, basic authentication will going to be removed in online. So let's start with basic authentication. So as I said, it's a simple authentication to integrate with the PC. We'll just provide a username and the password, which is password is web service access key. So what is web service access key? How we can generate it? We'll see this. Now, so in the user card, if you go to user setup and user card, you can see um, there is a web service access key over here. So if it is already expired, then what you need to do is just click on the actions and click on change web service key. So once you click on change web service key, you can see that do you want to generate a web service, and it will override this one. So if you say yes, so it will open up this window. So if you want to set a date, you can set it. If you click on this one, key will never going to expire. So click on OK. So it will generate web service access key. So if I go back, so what I need to do is I need a username and I need a web service access key. Username is my user ID and the password is web service access key. So we will see how we can integrate this in Postman. So meanwhile, we will this is a Postman application, whereas in the authorization tab, you just need to select a type as basic authentication and provide a username and the password. So that much. So if you are using online applications, online PC, then we will get in this message saying that web service access key is no longer supported in Business Central Online. Integration using these technologies will stop working. So please use authentication instead. So from the starting from April 2022, this is going to be deprecated. It's not going to support in online. Whereas in on-premise, still it will support. So coming back to the next authentication type, which is authentication, which is open standard for access delegations. So for the Business Central, we will use Azure Active Directory for authentications. Means whenever some third-party applications try to integrate with Business Central for online versions, they have to get an access token. By using access token, then only they can able to interact with the Business Central data. So why this integrated is this is a secure way of integration for online version. So once third-party applications while interacting, they have to submit the access token. So Business Central again take that access token and it will check with the Azure Active Directory whether access token is valid or not. If it is valid, then only it will provide a data back to the requester. So how this will show in the practical way. So for example, this is an uh, authentication flow for a general flow, not only for Business Central. Suppose assume user which means third party application opens a web browser which is sending a request to Business Central. In our case, web app is Business Central. So whenever he sends a request, it will redirect to Azure Active Directory um, to to ask user to provide a user credential, and Azure Active Directory issues a token to him. So in case if while interacting with the Business Central it doesn't provide an access token, then it will directly says that access token required or access token is expired. So he has to do this step. So he has to generate an access token or refresh the access token. True. Then once he got an access token, then he will send a request again to Business Central. Business Central validates the access token with the Azure Active Directory. If it's valid, then it will send a data back to user. So means we got to know that authentication, how it will work in a picture convey. So How we can register means, to do that we have to register application on Azure Microsoft Azure. So we can do that. So log into Azure portal, then search for the app registration. So once you say app registration, click on that. So click on the new registration, click on the new registration and enter the name, which is in I've just given a BC demo app, and whether it is for single tenant or multi-tenant, you select it and just provide on web URI. This is an optional, but it is recommended to add this URL over there and click on register. So once you click on register, overview window will open. So then click on API permission, click on add permissions. Once you click on add permissions, you will get this window. In this window, you select Dynamics 365 Business Central API. So once you select this API, you will prompt with this window. In this API window, you have to provide delegated permissions and application permissions. So what are all the permissions you require for this application? So I'll just say user impersonation means access for the signed in user, and financials for redirect all the permissions. So then application permissions, you just provide an API. This is very important. This is required, main thing. So API dot read write dot all, this application for all the web service APIs. So once you select this one, click on add permissions. Once you add all the permissions, it will be like this. So in the API permissions tab, the status is like this. So um, admin must grant the consent for to access the applications. So if in case if you are admin, you can grant the admin consent applications. If you are not, then request for the admin, you will to grant the applications. So if suppose if admin grants the access rights, then it will be like this. So once admin grant the access, then click on the certificates and secrets, click on new client certificate and provide a description and add the recommended details and click on add. So you will get the one client secret here. So just copy this value with this client secret value, note this down. So once after this, once you click on the overview window, then you can see that this is a client ID and this is a tenant ID. Okay, so note these two down, and previously we noted down secret value. So we need these three values. So now what we did in Azure is we created an app and we registered it. App name is BC demo. Okay, the next step is we have to register the app on Business Central. So search for Azure Active Directory applications. So once you select this one, click on Azure Active Directory. So click on grant consent. Sorry, enter the client ID which you copied in previously and say enabled. So which means that um, you are what you are giving a you are giving an permission or communicating with the Azure with the Business Central. So this is a main important step. So we need to provide a client ID, which is generated in previous step in Azure. So and add all the user group permissions over here. Then click on grant consent if you are admin. If you are not, then it will throw up an error. So once you done this, that means you need to provide a user groups. Without user groups, it won't work. That's it. Once you add that, it will be like this. So this is a client ID and the description, and it is enabled. Once it's done, so you have all the client ID with all these parameters, which is client ID and from Azure, and access token URL, which is tenant ID, which is the you copied from the Azure, or the tenant ID of your Business Central, and the client secret value which we copied, and the scope is this one, and client authentication is send client credential in body. So all these parameters are required for the postman. So how it looks like. So in the authorization tab, in the basic authentication, you've seen that type is basic. Now it is in OAuth 2.0, and here we have to select request status. So in the configuration of new token, so you just give a token name, whatever the name you can give it, client credentials and access token URL, which I shown in the previous slide, and the client ID which you copied, and the client secret value which we copied from there, scope, and send client credential in body. So once you add all these informations, click on get new access token. So it will generate an access token by interacting with the Azure. So if it is valid, then it will authentication complete and it will provide an access token. Like this, it is an encrypted one which will have an information of all the client ID and the secret values. So once you click on use token, it will update over here, and that's it. We can interact with the business central. So let's see in the demo how it will work. So I have basic authentication here. So leave about URL. So URL suggests that I'm just interacting with the um, interacting to this tenant ID and this environment name, and I need a customer's detail by using basic authentication. I will talk about this endpoints in the later video. So just we will focus on the authentication authorization tab here. The type is basic authentication. You can see there are so many authentication types. Currently for Business Central we will use basic auth for on-premises and authentication 2.0 for online. So basic authentication and the username which I copied from the user setup, and the password which is web service access key. So once if it is this two valid, then if you click on send, it will get a list of customers from this tenant or from that environment, from that company. So these are all the list of customers. There are the list of customers which is coming from the Business Central. So this is basic authentication. So as I said, basic authentication works for on-premises. Okay. So for the authentication, which is authorization tab, I'll come for authentication 2.0 and request status. Okay, then I'll enter the details, the token name. Suppose I given an today date. I'll just say one. So this will generate one token name, this one. So I'll say grant type is client credentials, access token URL. So the same thing here, from here to here it is a tenant ID, and rest everything is common, and client ID and the secret value which we copied from the Azure, and the scope is this one, and send client credential in body. So once you click on it, if authentication is valid, then it will generate an access token, proceed it. So this is my token name, and this is a token details, which is consists of token type as bearer, expires in this date, token name is this one. So just use token, so it will update. If you see it here, access token is added, which means token is got added here. So that's it. So we are using this token, send a request. So once access token is valid, it will get a list of customers from the Business Central by using Authentication 2.0. So this is a list of customers. That's it, guys. Thank you.